to hold me when I need a friend. My definition of heaven on earth might be short and sweet.
Shalom and welcome to TAPED with Rabbi Doug. Glad you could be with us. I have with me today my guest, Rabbi Victor Segal of Goldman-Segal Kosher Catering. And Rabbi Segal, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to be with you.
I wanted to ask you to come to be with us today because today I wanted to talk to you not only about what goes into kosher catering, but a little bit about the Chicago Jewish community. You are, if I'm not mistaken, the largest and oldest kosher caterer in the Chicago area. I know there are other kosher caterers who are maybe older than you on a personal level, but you really have still a very thriving business, a very busy business, and you've been around here for a long time. Can you give us a little hint about what goes into kosher catering? How do you get into kosher catering? You know, there are kosher restaurants, there are people who keep kosher in their homes, and there are non-kosher caterers and non-kosher restaurants. What goes into starting up a kosher catering business way back when you started?
Well, basically, we've been in business, Rabbi Doug, this is our 40th year in business. And if I were to try and give you some sort of history as to how it came about, I think the average person just wouldn't believe how it did come about. To try and answer to some extent your original question about what goes into kosher catering, etc., how does it basically differ from restaurants or from other type of other catering? Basically, the truth of the matter is kosher catering is like any other catering. It's basically a service to people who are looking for whatever the reason might be, for kosher, and want and desire to have for, again, multiple type of reasons, want to have the food that they're being served to be kosher. That does not mean that they want to in any way compromise quality or likewise service or even new innovation.
Variety.
I mean, basically, so what the transformation in the years of the 40 years, from the beginning to now has really been very great. And I guess to a certain extent, I've learned a great deal from watching my counterparts in the non-kosher and picked up many of their ideas and to be able to transform them into kosher recipes. As a matter of fact, I think that one of the interesting things that happened very early in the career was, as you know, we're in several hotels. One of the hotels, I don't know if it's permissible to mention it, so if it's not, then I won't. Okay. Is it or is it not?
Chicago,
okay, yeah. Well, anyways, basically, we're three hotels at the Ambassador West and the Westin by O'Hare, and by O'Hare also the Radisson by O'Hare.
And these are exclusively for kosher catering. Someone wants to come into those hotels and say, I want to get married there, or I want to do this. They cannot hire another kosher caterer to come in. You're exclusive.
No, and what we've done, because again I felt that this was extremely important in order to be able to fulfill all these requirements. In other words, something a little different, something that's going to be similar to a great extent to what they can get in the non-kosher, but yet kosher. I have insisted in all three places and wherever we go that we have a kosher kitchen. So our food is always prepared on location. We don't transport food. But I started to say at the Ambassador West, one of the things that I picked up there, and it was very interesting, the Ambassador West, going back some long time ago, had a particular dish that was their specialty that they created. It was called Coq d'Or. It's similar to what is now known as schnitzel. Mm-hmm. But their schnitzel was a little different because it had it was breaded in almonds, and it was extremely popular amongst them. And the Ambassador West, their clientele, especially at that time, was, and it might be even so now, was about 90% Jewish. Not necessarily kosher, but about 90% Jewish. And I felt it was important for me to learn exactly what they're doing and maybe transform their recipe into, a kosher recipe. So I sat down with the chef, and he told me what's what. And what I did was transform it in utilizing the kosher ingredients. But, Mama is placed within us. It's very interesting. Taste buds. Mm-hmm. So you can get the same chef, who is going to prepare, let's say, coq d'or or stir-fried chicken or whatever it is. And if he is a Frenchman, it's going to taste a little bit different. And if he is a Mexican, it's going to taste a little different. If he's Chinese, it's going to taste a little different. If he's Jewish, it's going to taste a little different. The interesting thing is that after we came up with our recipe for the coq d'or, it was so popular at the ambassador that they changed their recipe
to meet yours.
To meet ours, because this basically
That's a great story.
Yeah, this basically is because their clientele, went for the spicing, the different things that Mama placed within us, in our taste buds to say, this is what I want.
That's very interesting.
So it really was extremely interesting.
Tell me, you're the proprietor of the business. Your sons are with you in the business, running the business. Where did the name Goldman from, and what come from, and where did Goldman go? Who was Goldman? Because that was before my time into knowing the kosher caterers in the Chicago area.
I'll try and give you a little history of how Goldman-Segal Kosher Caterers came into being. And it's a strange sort of history. Prior to my going into this business, I received my smicha here at that time it wasn't Skokie, but the same Beis Medrash Torah, which at that time was on the west side, later moved to Skokie.
Smicha is rabbinical ordination.
That's correct. And from there, I took a pulpit here in Chicago, Kesser Maariv, and I built the shul there.
Which used to be on Greenview?
On Greenview and Devon. That's correct. And I built the shul there. It was, when I took it over, it was a two-flat house, which the basement was our Hebrew school, and we had close to 150 students.
East Rogers Park.
In East Rogers Park. And then the main floor was the synagogue itself, the sanctuary. And the second floor was where the shamash, the one who took care of the shul, lived.
Sexton.
The sexton. That's great, right. And what happened was that, thank God that the building was condemned by the Board of Health, and because it could put 150 kids into that place. So we tore down the building, and it was extremely exciting during that period of building. Well, I was all of 24 years old. And I was, after we built the shul, and having that excitement of building it, and then it became very routine, so it lost its flavor. And I was looking really to do something else. Well, I don't know how it came about, but I got a call from the president of the Zionist Organization of Chicago, a man by the name of Abe Finkelstein, who had a wine company called Crystal Wine Company, no longer in existence, and asked me if I would like to take over the Zionist Youth Commission, which was Young Judea and Junior Hadassah, and it sounded like a wonderful thing. So basically what I did is I took over the direction of the Zionist Youth Commission, and we officed at 1107 not 11, 72 East 11th Street. At that time, the College of Jewish Studies was housed there, and that's where our office was.
I want to point out two things because you're mentioning these things to people, and they may not be aware. Congregation Kesser Maariv is still in existence,
That's
Rabbi
right.
Louis Lazovsky,
That's
and
correct.
they relocated now on Gulf Road near Skokie Boulevard,
That's
not
correct.
far from Skokie
Right.
Boulevard, as far as distance. And the College of Jewish Studies is now Spertus College of Judaica,
That's right.
which is just by Balboa and Michigan Avenue.
That's right.
So I just wanted to point that out for those who are watching.
Anyways, it's very interesting. I was there working in the office, and I got a call. Camp Moshava, which was originally located in Rolling Prairie, Indiana, purchased a site in Wild Rose, Wisconsin.
Where it still is today.
Where it still is today. And I grew up in Wild Rose, not in Wild Rose, but in Rolling Prairie, Indiana. That's where I met my wife. Most of my friends basically met their wives at Camp Moshava. And when they purchased this new site and they had to get a camp director, they called me, this was while I was still working for the Zionist Youth Commission, and asked if I would take on the position of being camp director for Camp Moshava.
Was Camp Moshava at that time run by the religious Zionist organization as it is today?
Oh, yes. B'nai Akiva was the youth organization, and the religious Zionist at that time was called Apol HaMizrahi. That was a religious Zionist. And so basically what happened was I officed at that time at 72 East 11th until 5 o'clock. I was there from 9 to 5. And then from 7 to 10, I went to 127 North Dearborn, which was the Camp Moshava office. So I held down both jobs until finally it was just a little too much, and Camp Moshava grew into being much more than what I had thought it was going to be, and I became a full-time director there.
And then, of course, summers you had to spend in the camp also.
Yeah, I became full-time director there. I gave up my job with Young Judean. By the way, who followed me is Rabbi Joel Lairfield.
Ah.
He became the director right after...
Now the rabbi of Lincolnwood Jewish Congregation.
Jewish Congregation, right. Well, anyways, to make this story a little shorter, it really is. It's, because, again, I think that the whole reason I'm saying this is because I really never had any particular control of what I did in my life. It just happened. That was it. Just happened. Anyways, when I was the director of Camp Moshava, I became the chairman of the Chicago Rabbinical Council Kashrus Committee. Irving Goldman, who was, by the way, the director of Hapol Mizrahi, the religious Zionists, so we officed in the same office. I was with the youth and he was with the seniors.
Now, is this the Rabbi Goldman who was over 100 years that passed away?
No.
Who was Irving Goldman?
Irving Goldman, at one time, was a rabbi in South Bend, Indiana, and then he became the director of Hapol Mizrahi here in Chicago. Now he retired.
Still alive.
He lives in Eretz Yisrael. He retired something about 20 years ago, and he moved to Eretz Yisrael.
I never knew him. Okay.
Yeah, he was a very nice person. We're still friends.
Very nice.
Anyways, to try and make this as brief as possible, and I'm running through years over here, when I became the chairman of the Kashrus Committee of Chicago Rabbinical Council, I inherited a caterer that I wasn't too happy with. He'll be nameless. I mean, he's no longer in a business.
Inherited meaning he was under the supervision.
Under supervision of the Chicago Rabbinical Council. I was not happy with him because he had he ran simultaneously both a kosher and a non-kosher business. Although the non-kosher business was out of Chicago, but I felt that I felt it warranted special attention. So what I did is I assigned to him the most difficult of the mashgichim, the supervisors. My father, Alu Shalom, okay? And he couldn't move from here to there. And that's where we instituted, too, at that same time, we instituted this concept of, I don't know if you've ever seen in the kosher kitchens, the seals, like the seals that they put on railroad cars. I mean, that basically before that it was with locks and keys. And my feeling was that locks and keys, just like I have a key, someone else can have a key.
And this would be for people who don't know, when you close up a kosher kitchen, to make sure that nobody has tampered with any of the kosher utensils or ovens or anything else. The ovens are with a seal that must be cut or broken, that can't be resealed. And if something, or the lock to the kitchen must also have this seal around it, so if somebody with a key would have broken in there, there's a question on whether the room would still be kosher.
Not only that, but every seal has a number. So that when the mashgiach, the supervisor, would send in a report, which was required, and I imagine still required, they said the refrigerator is locked with seal number so-and-so, so that there was no question that it could be duplicated or anything else. Anyways, after close to a year of this particular caterer with this type of supervision, because he couldn't even go into his place.
Without a
It
mashgiach
was
being there.
impossible for him to go into his place. So he came up to our office at 127 North Dearborn and said, Rabbi Segal is still too tough. Do you know anyone who'd be interested in buying a business? That's how we came into the business. And I was ready for a career change. A young guy, and basically I was ready to move on. I knew as much about catering at that time as, I don't want to insult you, probably maybe you know more than I do, but at that time I certainly didn't know very much about it. My experience, did have experience basically in food purchasing, because I did that for the camp for 7 years. So I was very well of how you purchase, where you purchase, things like that. But
and knowing the kosher business, being a supervisor of kosher catering, so you had that.
Right, but believe me, camp cooking is not social cooking. In no way, there's no resemblance. It's an impossibility to make a comparison between the two. So we struggled for the first year. Irv Goldman also was ready for a change, and we formed Goldman-Segal Kosher Caterers, and we started in the business. Our initial years were very rough because we first learned, but that's basically how it started.
And so Irv Goldman was with the business until he moved to Israel?
Irv Goldman was with the business until, unfortunately, he had a heart attack, and he had to slow down. And being the type of person that he is, he felt he was taking too much advantage of the situation. So he said, Victor, if you'd like to buy me out, I want to go to Israel. So he moved to Israel. He lives right down by Dragan. And
a neighborhood in Jerusalem.
And it's been there for some 20-odd years.
So in 40 years of catering, you must have seen just about everything and prepared just about everything. When people come to you and they say, Rabbi, we're having a bar mitzvah, could you do this for us? Or Rabbi, we're having a wedding, could you do this for us? Or we're having an anniversary party, could you do this for us? Do you, as a caterer, present them with the menu and say, this is what we do? Or do you create things for people? How does that work?
I'll tell you, I'll give you the spiel that I use whenever we sit down, all right? Basically, all of our menus are printed. We publicize and put into writing all of our pricing. So there is no bargaining. Everything is very straight up and very clear. But what I do in my initial conversation with the people before we even start, I say to them, and it might sound a little strange, I said, we've been in the business a long time. And I find that there's two very, very important ingredients that have to enter into the picture in order to have a successful affair. But I don't know what they are. But you do. And they look at me, what do you mean? I said, basically, in order to have a successful affair, it has to be your style of entertaining, not mine. Which means you can take all of these menus, throw it into the garbage, and we're happy to design a menu that will reflect you. Secondly, it has to be within a budget that you feel is apropos and affordable. These two things are not necessarily synonymous terms, because everyone has their own concept of apropos. Everybody knows what, or should know, what is affordable. So I feel that the job of the caterer, at least this is our approach, is to be a listener, not a participant in this particular thing. And since I'm a human being, I can't keep my mouth shut sometimes, so I'll throw in what I think is right, but I tell the people, you have veto powers. And say, shut up. That's not what I want. I want something else. So we're basically a service business. And the moment someone who is in a service business stops being of service, he's out of business. Mm-hmm. Our business has grown basically not through advertisement, because I don't think you see very many advertisements of ours. Our business has grown through word of mouth. We're doing weddings now of bar and bat mitzvah boys and girls that we did initially,
Sure.
And in our initial years.
Sure.
So this basically, and it's always a wonderful, wonderful feeling. I think also that there's, I've always had a guilty feeling, Doug, about the fact that I left the rabbinate and I wasn't being, contributing somehow to the spirituality of people, so that what I started doing, which is now about 13 years, after my wife, Alea Shalom, passed away, I started to do something with married couples, or those who are planning to get married. And that basically, I think, was the major reason I did it, is because God blessed me with a fantastic marriage. And I know that the only way that we Jews have a future is if there are successful marriages. This is where the whole thing lies. And so I got frightened, because statistics tell us that over 50% of marriages now end in divorce.
Scary.
And within the first 10 years. Now, can you imagine, here's a couple sitting in front of you that are deeply in love to such an extent that they want to make a commitment. How can you even imagine that they're going to get divorced?
I know.
But we have to face realities. We got to face realities. So after we finished the menu and everything, I said, now comes the commercial. I said, what do you mean? I said, well, I want to sell you a policy. I'm going to sell you a policy that I think is going to make for a happy marriage. Because I have a stake in your success. And I feel it's important for me that you have a successful marriage. I said, now, it's not going to cost you money, but it's going to cost you a lot of effort. And I deal with the concept of basically that these people who are coming to the for a kosher event, especially a marriage, have at least a basic belief that in God, and that God is still around. And he didn't go on vacation after he created the world. And what I tell them, and which I think is a truism, that God, by definition, is the only perfection that there is. Man can strive for perfection, but man never reaches perfection. God is the only perfection. That means if God is perfect, there's nothing in the world that I can do that's going to make him better or make him worse. So why in the blazes did he give us all of these commandments? What's the purpose of it? If I observe the Sabbath or not, or if I put on the tefillin or not, or if I pray or not, it can't have an effect upon him.
Right.
So why is it? What was the purpose of it? And I asked them one question. I say, if I were to ask you, what is the one thing that every human being, no matter where they're born or wherever they come from, has a basic need that is universal? And I said, I'm not going to let you think too much about it, because I'm not talking about physical things. I said, I'll give you the answer. Everyone wants to be happy. Everyone wants to be happy. I don't care where the person lives. And I don't care if the person grew up in the desert or grew up, in Alaska. Every single individual is striving for their one thing, happiness. And that's the one thing that's always beyond what He's reaching for it. I say the only thing, by the way, that is constant, that always remains with us and gives us some sort of satisfaction is the hug. Mm-hmm. We never outgrow the hug. And it's something from the time Mama puts us to the breast until we're put in the grave, we always need the hug. And the hug has a variety of different ways of expressing. It's not just the physical. It's giving something that is not expected. That's the hug. Uh-huh. So I say to them, now we know from our life that every need of the human being has been taken, that we take for granted, is basically provided within nature. There's nothing that we need that somehow is not there to fulfill our need. Where is our need for happiness fulfilled? And I show them through 3 different mitzvot, commandments, how each one of these things will have a very direct effect upon a happy marriage. And try to explain to them. I speak to them about kosher, about Shabbat, and about Taras Mishpacha, sexual life.
Proper
sexual life. And I've, thank the good Lord, met with a great deal of success in doing this. And this is where I feel is...
It's a wonderful thing. People should know that not only do you do this for your clientele, but you're a community leader, you're involved in the Jewish community, in charitable organizations, and leading different events in the community and stuff. You're just someone who is respected in the Jewish community, and I can't thank you enough for being on the show and sharing your story with us. I wish you and Goldman-Segal much success and in the catering business and in the community, and everything should be well, and hopefully we'll have you on again because I know you have a lot more to tell. I want to thank all of you for being with us, and remember we're on next week, same time, same place, right here, and thanks again for being with us here on Taped with Rabbi Doug. Shalom.
העיר אשר בדד יושבת ובלי